Welcome to DD Durban Online. We're a church family on mission to see Durban change into a place where Jesus reigns. Here's this week's message.
Once a year, as a family, we take the opportunity to stand still and ask this question: what's the vision for this coming year? And I love this word vision, because vision is a picture of clarity. Do I have clarity for what God wants to come and do for my life? If I actually ask you, what's your vision for 2025? What's the plan that you have in your heart that you're looking forward to? What if you and God spoke about? Is there something that's burning in your heart already that He's saying, I want you to trust me for this? Can I ask, is your plan maybe filled with the idea of a blessing? Anybody have a blessed and prosperous future ahead in their mind? Dreaming about some blessing for my future? Yes, I see a few hands. Some people are excited. In fact, quickly, tell the person next to you, I will be blessed when and then you can fill in the blank. I am blessed when I. Just quickly tell the person next to you. It can be when I have $1 million, when I have $1 billion, whatever it may be. But just quickly tell the person next to you, I am blessed when I. Did we get some good stuff? Anybody, anything in the range of $2 million, something like that? Anybody, husband, wife, maybe, boyfriend, girlfriend, kids? Okay, I see a few hands. Exciting stuff. So, anybody like my wife? I will be blessed when she stops asking me this and telling me, I will be blessed when we get a venue and when we have a worship leader. I'm like, yes. I will also be blessed when you stop asking me that. That would be amazing. So we're trusting God for amazing stuff as well. But this morning, as we're diving into vision, the vision for Doxadeo as a family, it's His glory is our story. And for the first part of this journey, I want to make it a bit personal. So next week, we're kicking off with a sermon series of 4 weeks titled His Glory, My Story. And we're going to dive into the personal, practical spaces. And today, I want to actually, in essence, lay a little bit of a foundation for us as we're going to go there. Because I want to look at a man's story in the Bible, a very familiar guy. And the guy is called Jacob. And I want to look at the climax moment of his life with you guys this morning. So you can read with me. It's going to be in Genesis chapter 32. It's also going to be on the screen. And I'm going to read a really interesting and a very strange story of Jacob. It says here, verse 22, that night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. I just want to say, that guy has capacity. I mean, 11 kids, 4 wives, dude. Then, verse 23, after he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and a man started wrestling with him till daybreak. Now, this little story is known as Jacob wrestling with God. So this mysterious man, in the Hebrew text, you get the direction that he is actually God wrestling with Jacob. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, that's God couldn't overpower Jacob, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, let me go, for it is daybreak. But Jacob replied, I will not let you go unless you bless me. The man asked him, what is your name? Jacob, he answered. Then the man said, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome. Jacob said, please tell me your name. But he replied, why do you ask my name? Then he blessed them there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, it is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared. word pen, I'm pronouncing it strange to you guys, but it's specifically like that. Penny means face, and El refers to Elohim, face of God. That's what the word means. And the place where he saw God. Okay, cool. That's the story that we're going to be focusing on. Jacob wrestling with God. Now, if you're anything like me, you might have 1,000 questions in your mind now. One of the questions that always comes up to me, first of all, there's quite a lot strange stuff like, Jacob, why do you have 4 wives? Weird stuff there. And 11 children. But are you sure about this? How's things going? Those are just the superficial, surface level questions. And then he's wrestling with a stranger. And we find out that this stranger is actually God himself. And interestingly enough, God himself wrestling with Jacob doesn't have the power to overcome Jacob. What a strange story. What's going on here? I mean, God is almighty. How can he not pin Jacob down in 2 seconds? What's going on? What's the whole story behind this story? And then ultimately, this whole story centers around this one big desire that Jacob has. And he's longing for blessing. So this is a man wrestling with God for blessing. I wonder, how many of us are sitting here wrestling with God for some blessing in 2025? And you're busy chatting, and you have lots of questions. And you're in a big wrestling match. I think this might be appropriate to each and every single one of us sitting in this room. So to understand this story a little bit better, I want to take you guys on a bit of a journey through Jacob's life that we just build up. Because, you know, one of the things when you grew up in church, anybody here that did not grow up in church, quickly put up your hand if you did not grow up in church. Okay, that's everybody. So this is going to work beautifully. Everybody here grew up in church, so you probably have heard this story quite a few times over. And it becomes familiar, and with that familiarity, we lose something of the identity and the power of the story. We can't identify with it so much. So I want to take you guys on a bit of a journey, and to do that, we're going to look at Jacob's birth, and then we're going to look at his battle, and then finally we're going to look at his blessing. So we'll return to this passage at the end of our time together. But let's first dive in and look at Jacob's birth. Now, if you know Jacob's story well, you know that there was Jacob's mom, Rebecca, couldn't have kids. And then Jacob did the opposite, Isaac did the opposite of his dad, Abraham. He didn't make his own plans. He directly went to God. He prayed and he interceded. And the next moment, Rebecca was pregnant, not with one child, but with twins in her womb, Jacob and Esau. And while she was pregnant, the story goes that these 2 children were fighting in her womb. And she asked God, what's the story going on here in my womb? And then he said, there are 2 nations in your womb, and the younger will rule over the older. And then the day that Jacob was born, something remarkable happened. His brother Esau, the firstborn, came out, and then as he came out, Jacob, the man, had his little baby hand over that little baby heel of his brother, and he was holding on to the heel. Hence, his name is called Jacob, which means deceiver. Now, how do we get to that picture? And why Jacob deceiver? Well, let me quickly take you a little bit of, this is for the Bible nerds, the guys that would like to double click in the Bible and learn a little bit more. Let's kind of quickly go back to Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. Right after Adam and Eve failed in the garden, and God shows up and he addresses Eve, and Eve says he addresses Adam. Adam says it's Eve. Blame shifting, classic. Eve says, no, it's not me, it's the snake. And shame, the poor snake doesn't have a leg to stand on. And God addresses the snake. Then he sorts the guy out. And then he tells the snake this following thing. He says, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers, and he will crush your head. So there's this promised victor that's going to come from the woman, and he's going to crush the head of the snake. He's going to crush this evil thing that misleads us and brings death and decay and pain into this world. There is someone coming from women. He's going to be victorious. He's going to be our hero. Does that sound like Mary bringing Jesus? It's kind of the picture here. That's the first prophecy that God has stated. And then he says, in this moment when he's crushing your head, you will strike his heel. So you will wound this victorious victor coming from a woman that I'm going to send. But in this wounding battle, he will crush your head, and you will no longer have authority and power to deceive the image of God and kill and steal and destroy my creation. And now the rest of the Bible then is all about who's going to be the guy that's coming. So if you were wondering about the genealogies, that's the reason. We're looking, who's going to be the guy that's going to crush the head of the snake? And so we find ourselves in this little story, which is quite a bit further on, in the story of Jacob and Esau. And Esau is the firstborn, and clearly the firstborn is obviously the great guy, the right guy, the one that will be crushing the head of the snake, because his brother's hand is in what position? What's it grabbing onto? It is, in essence, striking and holding the heel of his elder brother. Jacob is born in the position of the snake. It's like the storytellers wants us to know that, listen guys, the oak that will ultimately become Israel and through whom Jesus would come, he is born as the snake. He's the deceiver. And that's what the story is then about. The story is about what happens if God's chosen one turns out to be a snake himself. Will that keep God from blessing us? Let's read. You see Jacob living up to his name as deceiver. So it's not Jacob Zuma, by the way. This is Jacob the deceiver. Little joke there for all the South African guys. Any case. And the next story that we read about him is him deceiving his brother out of his firstborn birthright, with a pot of lentil soup. And he takes that right. If you don't know what that is, if you're the firstborn of any household, that means you get a double portion of the inheritance. And at that moment in time, Jacob said, I want your inheritance. I'm going to get double portion. You're going to get one portion. What a sly guy. Snake-like, huh? Sneaky. And the next moment you read about him living up to his name is when he deceives his blind old father. I mean, who does that? Terrible oak. He dresses up like his brother and he steals his brother's blessing. The blessing that came from God, that he would be the one that would inherit the promised land, and through his line, there would come someone that will save the world. And that moment brought Jacob and his brother into an interesting fight, if I can say it like that. And Jacob's brother Esau was very angry, and he said, when dad dies, you die too. That's basically the statement that he made. He heard this, his mom heard it, because mommy helped him to deceive daddy. And then mommy said, you know what, I have a good idea. Seeming that your birth has now turned into a battle for life, I'm going to send you to my father, my father Laban, my nephew. He has daughters. You can find someone there to marry. So here we have Jacob. His deceiving ways clearly did not get him into the pound seeds that he wanted. He was trying for double inheritance. He was trying for double portion blessing. Yet now he's fleeing from his own hometown. And then something really interesting happens as he's on his way. As he runs, we read a little story of Jacob called Jacob's Ladder. Anybody knows this story? Very famous, familiar story. It's a story about Jacob finding a space to rest on his way to the east, to his nephew, running from his brother's danger. And he finds himself asleep that night. And in a dream, he sees a ladder going up from earth into the heavens. And then on that ladder, there are angels ascending and descending on this ladder. What a strange dream. And then on top of the ladder, God stands and he speaks a promise towards Jacob in that dream. Don't you just love the Bible? Filled with weird and strange stories. What do I do with this story? Well, let me quickly help you guys. When Adam and Eve was banished from the garden, who of you guys can still remember what was on the way out? There were two angels guarding the way out with a big sword so that no one may come in. And here we have a vision of angels and a way up, heaven and earth coming together. So what has Jacob dreamed about? What's he seen? He's seen the gateway to heaven. He say, guys, I found heaven on earth. I found the greatest blessing of all. Here is heaven. We're going back into the promised land. This is what God wants for us. That's basically the picture. He wakes up. It says he's filled with awe. He's overwhelmed by this moment. I've met God. I found the gateway to heaven. And in this dream, God tells him something very interesting. Now, just to quickly mention, many times when I've read this story, I don't know about you, I've always seen it in a very good light. Wow, Jacob, I wish I could have this. He calls the place Bethel. Huh? Because I have seen the gateway to heaven, the gateway to God. And I've always seen this in a very positive light, even though I didn't really know what to make of it, until one day when I heard this commentary speaking about this part of the story. And he mentions this little line here saying, in verse 12, it says, he had a dream in which he saw stairways resting on the earth with its top reaching up to the heavens. Now that little phrase, with its top reaching to the heavens, is found in one other story that's described specifically like this. That's kind of like giving us a double click on what to expect in this scene with Jacob. And that phrase is found in the story of the Tower of Babel, where people started building a little big tower, making a way up to the heavens and to make a name for themselves. And that's the Bible's depiction of you and me trying to make our own little versions of heaven on earth. We want heaven, but we want it our way, where my name is glorified, where I'm the main guy. And the narrator is giving us a little bit of a hint. He's saying, you're reading this story, you don't know what to do with it? I'm going to link it to you. I'm going to show you exactly what this story is really all about. This is Jacob running away from the thing that God has promised him, the promised land. He's leaving it now because of his deceptive ways, because he is committed to making a heaven of his own. Just quickly listen to this. God's blessing towards Jacob in that moment, in that little story. He says, I am with you, and I will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land, and I will not leave you until you have done what I have promised you, until I've done what I've promised you. Wow. If you know the story by now, you'll know that this is like the greatest hits. God's blessings to Abraham, God's blessings to Isaac, the same blessings just repeated to Jacob. And God even arrives at Jacob and he says, I'm the God of your father Abraham, Isaac, and what do you say then? Jacob. Nah. But Jacob's not saying that. He had this awful experience, and listen to him. Verse 20, it says, Jacob makes a vow to God, saying, listen to this, if God will be with me, and if he watches over me on this journey I'm taking, and will give me food to eat. I'm just directing him in exactly how he should watch over me, and clothes to wear, so that I may return safely to my father's household. Okay, now I quickly want you to note, he's putting down this as an if you are true to your promise, God. He's not saying the God of my fathers Abraham, Isaac, oh, and me, you're my God as well. No. He's a little snaky. He's taking all of God's with you, watch over you, bring you back, will not leave you. He says, if you will be with me, watch over me, return me safely. He's like taking God's words that God has promised to him, and he's like throwing it back in a little statement with a, if you do stay true to this. That's the picture. Jacob is a little snaky-okey. It's a bit deceiving. It's exactly the same as the snake did in the garden when he said, did God really say? And he throw God's words back to Eve, but he twists it. And Jacob starts playing the deceiving game with who? None other than God himself. Listen to what he says after he says the whole if. If I return safely to my father's house, then the Lord will be my God. So if you do all this for me, then I will serve you. Then I will take you as my God. You don't just tell me what's going to happen. That's kind of the picture here. And this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be your house. So I'm going to build a little house, and you need to stay in this little block, this little house. If you know the story of the house of God, later on, David wanted to build a house, and God says, who are you to build a house for me? I have my own space, kind of vibes. Here, Jacob is like, I'm bringing you down into my little box. I'm going to control God. That's his version of heaven on earth. My heaven on earth is you do what I tell you. And then, of all that you give me, I will give you a tithe. But you need to give me. No? So remember, if you don't give me enough, I'm not going to give you a big tithe. Do you see that little, it's those guys that's saying, I will pay my 10th, and then I'm square with the big man upstairs. He's like arm wrestling here with God. He's opening up the wrestling match. And he's busy making his own heaven on earth. Now, quick question. Whom of you have ever done this before? How many times in your life did you find yourself in an awestruck moment? God speaks to you and you hear him clearly, and then the next moment you start negotiating. Yes, I hear, but. God, yeah, I hear you say this and this and this about 2025 for my hearer. I'm clear on that. But, I have a few ideas that I would like to angle in here. Do you guys get what I'm saying? There's no just, I trust you, I follow you. There's this, I want to bring what you want to give on my terms down. You know what's interesting? Bethel this is the foundation story for Israel's greatest place of idolatry, because Bethel becomes the place where a king called Jeroboam would put up a big alternate temple, and he, not one golden calf, he would erect 2 golden calves. And the moment he erected, he says, these are the gods that brought us out of Egypt. How offensive is that towards God himself? And it becomes the hot spot of idolatry in Israel, so much so that the prophet Amos says, I don't even want to have anything to do with Bethel. This is what Jacob started at this moment. And still, God walks with him. The rest of Jacob's battle turns out to be that he is not the only one that can deceive. He quickly discovers that his father-in-law, the skoon family, skoon ma, skoon pa, and starts deceiving the man. He falls in love with a lady called Little Lamb. It's Rachel. But dad deceives him out of it. He gets goat, Leah, the one with weak eyes. And he works 7 years for this lady, and then he gets deceived, and he's so driven by desire that the moment he gets deceived, 1 week later he marries the other girl. Now, just quick little question. The first time we read about a guy making plans with another wife was Mr. Abraham himself. And did it go so well for him with 2 wives? Clearly not. Jacob, what's he doing? He doesn't even think about it twice. 2 girls. And then the next moment, both of these women brings him their servants, and now he's 4 girls. So he's like double Oprah. He's showing Oprah how things get done. When you really want to build heaven on earth for yourself, you like double it up, baby. And it's like the battle of the 2 snakes, because my father-in-law is a snake and he deceives me, and I'm a snake, and let's see which snake will be winning. And that's kind of like the story going on. And then we have another story of him deceiving his father after working for both of his brides. And lots of nonsense in that household. We see the story culminating in a moment with him and his dad, or his father-in-law, like getting to boiling point as he starts actually thinning out his father's flock on purpose. There's just too much detail to put into the story for you guys now. But he is deceiving his dad, and he's filling his pockets, and he's growing his livestock and his riches, and he's blessing like nobody's business. This grows up until the point of 20 years when he's worked for his father-in-law, and you can see the tension heating up, and that's the moment that he's reaching out to God again. Like we always do, our deceiving heavenly ways, our own, my heaven, my name way of doing things, ends usually up in the place where I'm, okay, Dad, I'm at the end of my rope. Please help me. God reminds him in that conversation, and he tells him, go back to the land that I've given you. Jacob, very excited, walks back to his wives, goes and tells them, you know what, your father has always been bad to me. And the God of my forefathers came to me and told me that he's sending us back and that he has blessed us. Look at how much he has blessed us. Look at all of these wonderful goats and sheep that I have accumulated. God has blessed us. Quick question, did God bless them, or did he deceive his way into that? He deceived his father into getting all of those goats. It wasn't God's blessing, not at all. It's his deceptive ways. Do you trust the word this man is saying? Just a quick question. He is so deceived. I want to show you this. Jacob is so deceived that he sees his own power to deceive the people around him as the act of God. He cannot even distinguish. He sees evil as good. That's where the narrator brings us. And he realizes, I'm in big trouble. So he leaves without even telling his father-in-law. His father-in-law hears about it. He runs after him. You can just imagine the guys coming down. Where are you taking my daughters? The whole story. They should have had a massive battle. But thank God there was grace. That did not happen. And they're off the next morning. Now, this is where we find Jacob ultimately standing before the moment of his blessing. Now, he's been deceiving his way through life, hook, line, and sinker. Wherever he gets an opportunity, he believes deception will give him blessing. That's the power that I will rely on. Self. That will give me a great name. That will give me great glory. Because life, it's about my glory. That's my story. My story is about me, my heaven, what I want, and how much I want of it, when I want it. And I will use my deceptive ways to get it as much as I can. I will lie. I will steal. I will trample on other people. I will even put my wives and my children in the most horrible position. I mean, he showed favoritism in those relationships. It is terrible. This guy's whole universe is now falling apart. And this is the climax moment as he's running from his father. They put up a covenant and dad says, cool, you can go, we have peace, but you never come back here and I'll never go back there. But that's it. That's kind of the final say moment. Jy en skoonpaas, die mens so lekker om myself te tafel. With me? And the only place Jacob is left to go now is back home. But who's waiting at home for Jacob? Well, we have his brother that promised and said, if dad dies, you die with him. Can you see why this man is wrestling? Can you see why he's cornered? Because all of his ways has led him to this moment where there's no way out. And the only hope that he has is God himself and the promises that God has given. Now, does God want to bless Jacob? Absolutely. He's promised that he will do this. And through Jacob's line, there will come someone that will save everyone. The reason why we're sitting here is because God stayed true to his promise with Jacob. But do you now see what the wrestling match between God and Jacob is all about? It's about God saying, I want to bless you, Jacob. And Jacob saying, thank you, but I want it this way, please. If you do it, then this. So here's my conditions for your blessing. Do you guys get what I'm saying? Quick question. Where are you wrestling with God? Because I can tell you, God's intention is to bless you. Overwhelmingly. You know, Ephesians says that in Christ, you have received every spiritual blessing in the heavenly realms. There is nothing, no blessing is withheld from you and me in Jesus. Yet the reason why we struggle to embrace it is because we want to have it our way. And that's the wrestling match. That's what it means when this story tells us that God could not overpower Jacob. Because Jacob is like, I want blessing, but I'm not going to do it your way. I want blessing, but I'm not going to do it. It's leading to my literal death. I am at the end of my rope. My next step, when I go across this, I will die. That is guaranteed. That's what's in my heart. I know facts. That's the picture. And in this match, God even commends him. He says, just well done, buddy. Jy's hardkoppig. You're hard-headed. You really want it your way. And it's in that moment that God realized, I'm dealing with the snake within Jacob. Because Jacob is my image and my likeness. And he is the one that I've called. And not just want to bless, but through whom I want to bless the world. Can I just say that to you this morning? I experienced so clearly to say this. You are his beloved child. And he does not just want to bless you, but he wants to, through you, bless Durban, your family, your workplace. He wants blessing to flow through every single step that you take in this city every day of your life. That's the Jacob story. So what did God do? What does God do when you don't want to listen? Well, he just touched Jacob and he wounded the man a little bit. Anybody ever experienced a wound in life? I can tell you I have. And it was clear and directly from God. Because there was some things standing in the way of what he wanted to do in my life. And after he wounded and I repented, you know what happened? The same thing that happened to Jacob. It's interesting that we see Jacob no longer fights. He's no longer in a wrestling match. But the moment God wounds him, what does he do? He holds on for dear life. And he says, I will not let you go. It's not, I will continue to fight. It's like, I will not let you go until you bless me. Do you know what's happening? Jacob is discovering that God is his blessing. God is his way to blessing. God is actually the way in to heaven. That's what Jacob is discovering in this moment. And then God decides to bless Jacob by giving him a brand new name. And it's God is saying, you know what? Up until now, your life has been defined by deceptive ways. You are a deceiver. And it's brought you to the point of death. But now on forward, your life will be defined by this moment with me. And I call you Israel, the one who wrestled with Elohim, the one who wrestled with God and man, and God blessed. Wow. Guys, what Jacob has discovered is that you do not exist for your own glory. Your existence is for his glory alone. And the blessing that you long for is surrendering to that truth. And when I'm reading this story to myself, something is just lifting up in my own heart. And that's actually the thing that I wanted to put down for us. When do you want to surrender? Do you want to wait until the wrestling match and you limp for the rest of your life? Or do you want to surrender even quicker than that? Do you want to say, Dad, I trust you. You want to bless me? Whatever you say, I can't see it now. I walk with you. Whatever you say, I do. Open up my eyes for wherever I do not have clarity, or I don't have the vision to see it in 2025 in my life. Where I'm missing the opportunities to portray your glory to the friend next to me by loving them, by forgiving my enemies, and inviting them over and building friendships, journeying with them, by putting you first in everything that I do. That's clarity in terms of vision. That's the moment his glory becomes our story. I want to end off with this little statement of Jesus meeting Nathanael as he's calling his disciples. I don't know if you know this. It's not on the slides. It's just in my heart now. And as he sees Nathanael, the first words coming out of his mouth is, here is an Israelite in whom there is no deception. What's Jacob's new name? Israel. What was his whole story about? Deception. And here Jesus finds a guy that carries the name but doesn't carry the history. And he's like, wow, how do you know? And then he says, wow, how do you know my name? And then God says, I know. I saw you under the tree. We don't really know what's going on there. I'm not going to dive into that now. And then he's amazed. And God says, you're amazed that I saw you under the tree? Let me tell you what you will see. You will see angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man. What's Jesus saying there? Well, he's taking us quickly back to that little story of Jacob's dream. And he's making a statement. He's saying, you know that way in, those stairs where the angels ascended and descended? You will not see them ascending and descending to the Son of Man. You will not see them ascending and descending from the Son of Man, but you will see them ascending and descending on the Son of Man. And what were the angels walking on? On the ladder, the way in, up into heaven. So what's Jesus saying? He's saying, I am the way in to your blessing. If you want heaven on earth, you follow me. That's the invitation. So may this morning there be no one in DD Durban with deception in their hearts. But may we truly bow down and say, Jesus, you are the way to the blessing. The 2020 thrive, as they say. Thrive here. You are the way into that space. Let's pray.
Thanks for joining us online today. As a family, we would love to meet you in person, so plan a visit to our DD Durban campus by going to doxadeo.org/Durban.